We must not allow foreign financiers to hijack our development process. We cannot and will not build a new Liberia for all Liberians if we blindly pander to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and their proxies in the United Nations. These neoliberal institutions are not committed to the radical transformation required to reimagine Liberia. As someone who loves this country with every fiber of my being, I feel very honored and privileged to address you today. When I think of Liberia's birth as a nation, I often picture fists of all shapes and sizes raised in the air like this. Because our Declaration of Independence on July 26, 1847 was a revolutionary act of defiance. Back then, when blackness was synonymous with bondage, we Liberians dared to be free. Inspired by our Haitian sisters and brothers who had led the first successful slave revolt in history, we dared to reclaim Black personhood. Decades later, when our beloved continent was being carved up in the European scramble for Africa, swallowed whole by colonialism, we dared to be sovereign. In fact, our very existence as Africa's first Black republic inspired a race benighted. Lest we forget, our Declaration of Defiance happened nearly a century before independence movements began in earnest across this very continent. So, Liberia's Independence Day should be called In Defiant Day, because since you like that, I'm going to repeat it. Liberia's Independence Day should be called In Defiant Day, because 177 years ago, our foremothers and fathers defied the odds. They attempted to prove that Black self-rule was not only possible, but also undeniable. They embraced Black internationalism long before this form of solidarity became an act of resistance. Our amalgam of different identities and cultures, West African, West Indian, Caribbean, Central African, and North American, was a radical affirmation of Africa meeting its diasporas. This exceptional legacy is our destiny. Yet, when we talk about ourselves today, in the narratives that we pass down from one generation to another, we tend to forget the magnitude of 1847. We forget that this glorious land of liberty was founded on abolitionist principles. We forget that dignity once defined us. Somehow, somewhere, some way, we lost touch with our common humanity. We created citizenship tiers based on ethnicity, class, gender, religion, and race. We mortgaged our resources to the highest bidder. We placed profit before people and planet. We silenced and suppressed dissent. We mistook autocracy for democracy. We failed to preserve and protect the cultural, artistic, and scholarly traditions that fill our hearts, enliven our souls, and sharpen our minds. And in the aftermath, we fought a brutal, protracted war that left death and destruction in their wake. And in the aftermath of such carnage, we achieved negative peace, the absence of direct physical violence, when we should have been pursuing positive peace, the absence of structural violence. Now, understandably, for many, July 26 symbolizes not defiance, but defeat. Not rupture and regeneration, but regression and retreat. Not inclusion, but exclusion. Not cooperation, but contestation. From 1847 onwards, our negotiations over land ownership, political participation, identity, and belonging yielded both productive and destructive outcomes. Our nearly 200-year history as a nation exposed both collaborative and combative elements of who we are. Despite adopting a unification and integration policy 1 century after independence, we never actually united against a common existential threat until the Ebola outbreak of 2014 to 2016. For the first time, in that moment, instead of attacking each other, we stepped into our collective purpose and showed that in union strong, success is sure. We cannot fail. We proved that what started out as a 19th century experiment in black self-determination had grown into something larger than we could ever have imagined. In this, our 177th year, I urge us to reimagine what it means to be one nation, indivisible. Oh, how sweet this country could be if we only rebuilt it for all of us to enjoy. We must believe that there is sufficient space to accommodate our differences and our shared experiences, that there are enough resources to supply our basic needs and cultivate our God-given talents. And so, we must narrow wide gaps between the poor and the prosperous, between the powerless and the powerful, between women and men, girls and boys, young and old, rural and urban, domestic and diasporic. Every 26th should be a moment of reflection and reckoning. Have we dared to be defiant in the previous year? Have we treated each other with civility and not cruelty? Have we upheld high standards of accountability? Have we reduced inequality and redistributed wealth to enable everyone to thrive, not merely survive? Have we developed functioning systems that will outlive us? Have we taken full responsibility for our socio-economic transformation? My challenge to us on this Defiant Day is to build back better. My challenge to us on this Defiant Day is to build back differently. Now, I have traveled the length and breadth of Liberia's 15 counties and our 16th county of the diaspora. And one thing always rings true. Each and every one of us wants to live a life of dignity. Now, our methods of achieving self-respect and self-worth have not always been compatible, fair, or just. Yet we cannot build a new Liberia for all Liberians, this year's 26th theme, until we all possess a basic level of well-being. Dignity must define us. This should be our creed, our mission, our vision, our roadmap, our North Star, our prayer, our central unifying core and ideal as a people. Dignity must define us. Those who came here yearn for dignity. Those who were already here yearn for dignity. Liberians at home and abroad currently yearn for dignity. Dignity must define us. But our goal must be inclusive growth, not growth by any means necessary. And if inclusive growth is our mission, then we must cancel contracts with poorly performing multinationals and renegotiate concession agreements that violate our Liberian laws, including our labor laws and our international human rights standards, including environmental governance. These agreements must be amended in consultation with affected communities and should yield improvements in tax collection. We must leverage increased domestic resource mobilization from these revised concessions to pay off internal and international debt and clear our arrears with regional institutions that we actually founded, such as the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, and the Mano River Union. Now, we do not need to reinvent the wheel, but we can be innovative in our advocacy of integrity. Liberia has a triple heritage of faith traditions. So what do African metaphysics, Islam, and Christianity have to teach us about greed and graft? How do they address Bagba, the title of my first book, which loosely translates into Bassa as lying, cheating, stealing? How do they promote Jade, the title of my sequel, which means honesty, truthfulness, transparency? Because corruption is not just rampant in the public and the private sectors. It is enmeshed in our everyday human interactions. It is enmeshed in our everyday human interactions. We even use coded language or other euphemisms to conceal our misdeeds. Cold water, gato, flexibility fees. Huh? My favorite, des contrées aussi en a technique. We often point the finger at our government, failing to realize that corruption begins in the home, that corruption begins in the community, that corruption is a function of both poverty and greed, and that a corrupt regime is a reflection of a corrupt society. So, while modifying our values from top to bottom, bottom to top, we must enforce already sound laws while building additional safeguards to curb corruption. We must strengthen judicial bodies and integrity institutions by populating them with impartial patriots. Name and shame those found guilty of evading public trust. Force them to restitute stolen funds and resources. And then send them to jail. High-level corruption, in particular, I'm going to repeat this because I want you to remember it. High high-level corruption in particular is like mass murder. And we must treat it like the egregious crime that it is. Because the rule of law is not some fashionable accessory we put on when it suits us. It is a protective armor that we must wear every single day in our values-based revolution. Now, in addition to prosecuting people in the soon-to-be established National Anti-Corruption Court, we must also remove corruption-inducing expenditure from our national budget, such that inflated salaries for elected and appointed officials, imported vehicles, fuel and scratch card allotments can be completely done away with. These funds should be reallocated to incentivize doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers who serve under-resourced regions of this country. All government agencies must be audited, and elected and appointed officials should declare their assets for public scrutiny as a requirement for assuming office. On the international affairs front, we must not allow foreign financiers to hijack our development process. We cannot and will not build a new Liberia for all Liberians if we blindly pander to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and their proxies in the United Nations. These neoliberal institutions are not committed to the radical transformation required to reimagine Liberia. Moreover, our socio-economic transformation must be internally driven, not externally imposed. So, a reimagined Liberia reduces poverty and inequality, yes, but it also redistributes wealth, invests domestic resources into basic social services, protects land and labor in the midst of capitalist reintegration, and expands prosperity for all. This is how we address structural violence and unfreedoms head on. Dignity must define us. Dignity must define us. We must forge new strategic partnerships based on mutual benefit and disabuse ourselves of the notion that we have a special relationship with America. Thank you. Truth be told, this special relationship only exists in our imagination. Lest we forget, the United States was one of the last countries to recognize our independence. Lest we forget, the United States has taken more from us than it has given. Lest we forget, the United States will always serve its own interests above all else. Once we accept these truths, we will appreciate that a reimagined Liberia is nobody's stepchild. A reimagined Liberia is not only free from colonial relations of power, It is also free from colonial artifacts that cripple us. In this vein, I would like to renew previous calls to adopt national symbols that represent the cultural breadth and historical depth of our shared experiences. I urge us to forge a new political identity by reimagining and revising these symbols. Why is the national motto on our seal not "The love of liberty united us here"? As suggested by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report. Why are we still calling our highest honor, our highest national honor, the most venerable order of knighthood of the pioneers of the Republic of Liberia? When the word pioneers remains politically charged, how could renaming our capital Monrovia help to decolonize us? By refashioning our flag, our seal, our national anthem, our national awards, amongst others, we can reimagine a Liberia based on a set of ideals that we all uphold. We should establish a committee of Liberian scholars, local government officials, cultural experts, and visual artists to devise new symbols of national relevance that will culminate in a referendum. We must also adopt one of Liberia's most widely spoken languages as our national language, and embrace Liberian English as our lingua franca. Now, this does not negate the need to master standard English. Instead, it promotes multilingualism as a form of nationalism. Because our norms and traditions are fluid rather than fixed, we must understand that the dichotomy between indigenous and settler, domestic and diasporic, is false. One thing that unites us all is our shared history of migration. Now, some of us are more recent migrants than others. For example, most of Liberia's 16 ethno-linguistic groups are not indigenous. They actually migrated in several waves from the 12th century onwards. By the time free and formerly enslaved blacks arrived on the coast of pre-settler Liberia in the mid-19th century, 250 years of migration had preceded them. So, our shared historical narrative must be that we are all immigrants. None of us belongs to this country more than the other. Dignity must define us. To President Boakai, I know many people warned you about inviting me to serve as national orator. They told you, Dalegega sharp mouth. But you did not listen to them. You did not listen to the naysayers, and for that, I am both humbled and grateful. The Liberian people elected you to rescue them. Six months in, expectations are high and morale low. But all is not lost because true change takes time. Though you inherited a laundry list of priorities to tackle, I urge you to focus on a handful of tangible goals in the next 6 years and work on achieving results. Forget about political niceties and partisanship and institute swift reforms that will cement your legacy as a respected statesman. Do you want to be remembered for condoning lawlessness or respecting the rule of law? In regards to the former, you have made some mistakes along the way. From the tenured positions debacle to the appointments of questionable characters in key positions of trust, you know who they are. To the controversy of what I call Yellow Machine Gate. I urge you to course correct before you lose the confidence of the Liberian people. Assemble a diverse and nationally representative team of competent and committed Liberians with integrity. Devise mutually agreeable, time-bound deliverables for them to achieve and hold them accountable. Demand that all appointees roll up their sleeves and get to work or move out of the way of progress. Having said that, the arrest agenda appears to be more of a multi-sectoral development wish list than a broad-based vision for our future. I propose using the phrase "dignity must define us" as the unifying anchor for this administration's development plan. The process of managing change and delivering public goods must be Liberian-led, Liberian-financed, and Liberian-managed. I urge you to run the executive branch like the well-oiled machine it should be. President Boakai, schedule quarterly presidential town hall discussions on the state broadcaster so that citizens can converse with you in real time. Mandate your ministers and heads of state-owned enterprises to do the same. The Liberian people, elected and executive, they presumed would be accessible and accountable. Please, please, please do not disappoint them. Dignity must define us. Can I hear it again? Dignity must define us. I would like to end my oration with a special message to Liberians at home and abroad. To women and youth in particular, I see you. The twin challenges of sexism and ageism have left some of you feeling disillusioned and angry. I see that you're struggling, that some of you have lost faith in a system that rewards harming people rather than hurting them. I see that you have lost faith in a system that rewards harming people rather than helping them, especially those we deem weak and disposable. That ache in the pit of your gut is your will to demand more. Don't lose the fire in your belly. To Liberians worldwide, I am aware that our sweet land of liberty is far, far, far from a utopia. I remain convinced, however, that in my lifetime, our country of many firsts will reassume its rightful place as a beacon of hope for this continent. Because a reimagined Liberia is a liberated Liberia. I invite you to help me reimagine Liberia anew. because we are the ones we have been waiting for. Happy 177th Independence Day, Liberia. Thank you plenty.